Released back in 2024, Wuthering Waves is a free-to-play RPG developed by Kuro Games using Unreal Engine 4, and with its latest Cyberpunk collaboration, I think this is the perfect time to revisit the game. Since its release, the game has received numerous updates, along with changes to the graphics menu. So, without wasting any time, let's see how it performs, and find the optimized settings. Starting with Anti-Aliasing, the game utilizes TAA as its default method, and even when the camera is still, the image looks quite shimmery. Turning Anti-Aliasing off slightly improves still image stability, but even slight camera movement is enough to make it look worse. DLAA, on the other hand, delivers a much better image, but because the game utilizes an older preset, it still isn't perfect, and moving the camera at certain angles can make the image noticeably shimmery. Because of this, I recommend using preset K. It provides a much sharper and more stable image compared to standard DLAA. Performance-wise, going from off to TAA costs almost nothing. DLAA costs around 3.5%, while DLAA preset K costs around 13%. So here, I recommend using preset K or disabling anti-aliasing entirely if that option isn't available. Now moving to special effects quality. This setting controls visual effects quality, such as character attacks and other VFX. Performance-wise, going from low to medium, or even high cost only around 2%. Visually, both medium and high look similar, so here, I recommend using medium. Next up is shadow quality, where low removes most shadows entirely, medium adds them back, high improves shadow resolution and shadow draw distance, while ultra high looks very similar to high. Performance-wise, going from low to medium costs around 19%, high around 36%, and ultra high around 47%, making this one of the most demanding settings in the game. I recommend using high. Next one is LOD Bias, and this setting is supposed to improve object detail and texture quality, especially for distant objects. During testing, I could not notice any meaningful visual or performance difference. Still, to be on the safe side, I recommend keeping this on high. Moving to Capsule AO, this setting controls ambient occlusion. Performance-wise, going from off to low costs around 20%, while medium and high cost around 31%. Visually, there's not much difference between the settings. So here, I recommend using low. Next up is volumetric fog, and here, going from off to even low can cost around 7% performance. And because the game does not heavily rely on these effects, I recommend keeping this setting off. For volumetric lighting, enabling this setting costs only around 2 to 3% performance, and it can work even without volumetric fog enabled. Because of this, I recommend keeping this on. Motion blur costs around 4% performance, so you can enable it if you like the effect. Bloom costs only around 2% performance, but in this game, the effect feels a bit overused, and playing for long periods with it enabled can sometimes feel overwhelming. Still, this ultimately comes down to personal preference, but I recommend keeping it off. Moving to crowd density, this setting does not have any major performance impact, unless you have a really weak CPU. As you can see, going from low to medium increases the number of NPCs, while high looks quite similar to medium. So here, I recommend using medium. Moving to foliage density, this setting increases the amount of painted grass. Performance-wise, going from low to medium costs almost nothing, high costs around 2%, while ultra-high costs around 5%. So here I recommend using medium. Foliage Fade Out makes grass and foliage become translucent when they get close to the camera. This setting can cost up to 15% performance, and it is not simply because more of the scene behind the foliage becomes visible. As you can see, exiting this bush results in noticeably higher FPS. Because of this, I recommend keeping this off. Render distance does not have any meaningful performance impact again, unless you are using a weaker CPU. So here I recommend keeping this setting at farthest. Lastly, I want to talk about some miscellaneous settings. Starting with enemy hit flash, this setting shows a black hit effect across the entire enemy model when you attack them. Damage numbers. Well, they simply show damage numbers. And since this is a HUD element, it has essentially no performance impact. Physical-based animation provides a slight, but noticeable improvement to things like clothing physics. And since it does not cost performance, I recommend keeping this enabled. Now, after testing all the settings, here are my optimized settings. As you can see, these optimized settings deliver almost 30% more performance. But keep in mind, performance gains may vary from system to system, but these settings should definitely provide some improvement. So with that said, if you like this video, please consider subscribing, and let me know which game you want to see optimized next.